The Chiefs have started off 0-2. We talked about it on Monday a little bit. We head into this weekend against the New York Football Giants. Sunday Night Football. Should be an interesting matchup. Welcome, EDJ, back to the program, to the Pop Show Notes podcast, and everybody else back in. We got a lot to talk about today. It seems like we say that every week, but there's a lot to dive into, I think. As well as seeing last night's game between the Dolphins and the Bills. I think a lot of people thought that the Chiefs would have a lot of eyes on this game and see how the Dolphins season shapes out for a pending fire sale of the team. So we welcome EDJ back. How are you doing today, buddy?
You asked me that before we came on, and I said, I don't really know. It seems like a lot of unknowns right now. And watching that Bills-Dolphins game last night, just kind of seemed like that was the last possibility of the Bills of having a loss for the next 8 weeks. I mean, if you looked at their schedule, it was the most laughable NFL schedule you've ever seen for a team that's been in the playoffs every single year for the past 4 or 5 years. It just seems ridiculous that they got away with that. Just in terms of the Chiefs in general, watching the Eagles game the other day, but we haven't got a chance to talk about that yet. It just kind of seems like, and I said this in the live that you guys had, it just seems like there's a lot of complacency right now, with Andy Reid, with the offense, with just the team in general. Lots of finger pointing, literally. So it doesn't look like the right mood right now for the Chiefs, and it's concerning. It's concerning for everyone involved. It's concerning for the fan base. If you want a fire sale and if you want Tyreek or like you told me, even HN or potentially or somebody like that, you have to win in order to, be qualified for a fire sale, really. So they have to step it up here and, playing the Giants on Sunday Night Football. It sounds ridiculous to say it doesn't get much bigger than this, but it really does. You're the third week into the year, and you're 0-2, and you were a favorite to potentially go back for a 4th straight Super Bowl, and now you're kind of looking like your head's in the sand. So, there's a lot of problems that they have to address, and if they don't win on Sunday, it's looking real scary.
No, I completely agree. I do think this is a big game, and honestly, from what I've seen or heard, I guess, in the media, I was listening to the radio this week, the Giants don't seem to be much of a threat to a lot of media in Kansas City, which, me and E talked about it, coming into the season, that this is a sneaky game. The Giants have a really good defense. Russell Wilson threw for 400 plus last Sunday. I don't think he does that this Sunday, but it is something to take into consideration. I think the Giants are better than what a lot of people think or what a lot of people have seen, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I didn't watch the game on Sunday. I did watch them a little bit the first game of the season, but I think that this is a little bit of a trap game going on the road, week 3, Sunday Night Football. We haven't seen much out of the Giants. I think the Giants are also 0-2, or right? I actually haven't looked at it. But real quick, before we jump into that, I guess we'll talk more, and I'll look up their schedule to see what their actual record is. I do believe they're 0-2. But to go to the Bills' schedule, I actually hadn't looked at the Bills' schedule yet. They do have quite a cake schedule coming up. They now have the Saints next week, Patriots following that, Falcons, Panthers, and then the Chiefs November 2nd. Really, then the schedule kind of picks up for them. They got the Dolphins again, but then the Bucks, Texans, Steelers, Bengals. That might be a little bit tougher of a stretch there for them. Then they get the Eagles late in the season, December 28th, way later on. But yeah, they do have a pretty weak schedule all in all. So I think that, I mean, they're the media darlings right now, right? Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the league. I think Mike Greeny said either today, I think it was this morning, said that no one has ever played the quarterback position as well as Josh Allen. I get it. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's a fun thing to talk about right now. Josh Allen is playing out of his mind. I will give him that. Like, he is playing really well. But I think the team is also playing really well. I mean, Josh Allen really didn't do anything last Sunday against the Jets too much. I didn't look at the actual stat line, but he's my dynasty fantasy quarterback, and he put up 11 points. So, I mean, I know he was out for a drive or two, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a fun story. The Bills always seem to be a fun story. They're finally going to win a Super Bowl, or they're finally going to beat the Chiefs and go to the Super Bowl, and if they don't win, whatever, it's still the Bills, it's still Josh Allen, Josh Allen, Josh Allen. Oh my God. We just stop? Josh Allen is a phenomenal talent. That's not what either of us are saying here. The problem is his talent runs out. All of these guys run out of talent. It's just anyway. We've talked about that 1,000 times.
Yeah. So let's get into your thoughts on this past Sunday for the Chiefs Eagles game.
Yeah. Again, I said it on the live. It makes me nervous that this is kind of Andy, focusing on what Andy wants to do. And we talked about. Well, we didn't talk about this, but I talked about this later. Is that Andy's all about keeping his friends close, keeping his coaching friends close to the sideline. And the other problem is that you talked about this, I think you touched on this with EB. At least we had an aggressor on the sideline that was willing to, fight back with someone. Nagy's obviously not doing that. Andy's not really known for doing that. So it's just, we don't have anything on the sideline. We don't have an aggressor. We don't have, outside of Travis Kelce, throwing fits. And that's not being an aggressor. That's just, throwing a fit. And that's something I thought we were past with Travis Kelce. He did that for a long time, threw fits and got, personal fouls a whole bunch. I thought we were over that. I don't know. It just seems it's very confusing, when you watch this team, and yes, the ball didn't bounce their way. And if, honestly, let's be real, Travis catches that ball, they win this game. Everyone talks about, the Eagles are just so much better. The Eagles are just so much better. I didn't see that. I saw two teams are pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's one thing that I didn't understand, especially from Eagles fans. Which I totally get it. Look, you're gonna pine for your team, and I totally get that. But at the same time, and I get the Eagles have won 3 straight games against the Chiefs, 3 straight games now against the Chiefs. Awesome. One was a Super Bowl. You got a chip, right? But to say that, there was a video I saw that came across my timeline or through the algorithm on YouTube of an Eagles channel talking about how they exposed the Chiefs on Sunday. If you look at that game, if you look at all the statistics, the Chiefs led in almost every single statistical category. They were better on third downs. They had more passing yards. The Eagles had 1 more rushing yard than the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. I mean, the Chiefs dominated this game from a statistical standpoint and gave the game away. I mean, I very much think that Sunday was, it comes down to that interception. I mean, if Travis Kelce doesn't tip that ball up, maybe the Eagles win, maybe. But there is a high probability the Chiefs win that game if Travis Kelce just catches that ball. I mean, it was right to him. And shout out to Pat. I mean, he took blame for it. But it's also, like you mentioned, the tantrums on the sideline. You got a 29-year-old quarterback, or 30 years old now as of this week, Patrick Mahomes, and a 35-year-old tight end that's been in the league for over a decade. And, the guy that's been in the league for over a decade is over there throwing tantrums while the quarterback's sticking up for him, and which is great. I think it's good to see, but it is also frustrating, I think, from our standpoint, where it's that's the game right there. I mean, you want to talk about the not called false starts on the tush push plays. You want to talk about the Eagles lining up in the neutral zone, and the Chiefs also lined up in the neutral zone, but they're reacting to the offense. That's kind of been my take all week is, if the offense is going to line up in the neutral zone, the defense should also line up in the neutral zone. They're reacting to the offense, right? So take all that away. I don't even care about that. We can talk about it, but that is not why the Chiefs lost this football game. at the end of the day, it comes down to that one play, I think, in a big way. And the 4th and 4 call. I mean, the Chiefs spotted the Eagles 3 points at the start of the second half. I mean, I don't know what, and that goes back to the complacency of you come out in a split T formation with a 30-plus-year-old running back, or 30-plus-year-old running back, and expect, I just don't understand what they're expecting out of the backs. I would love to see more Brashard Smith. I think it's time. Like, we've seen what we can see out of Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, and it's not great. It's all right. It'll get you by, but I think adding more Brashard Smith into the mix is really the way to go if you're not going to go out and find another running back. And I was, we talked about this right before we started recording, but I was kind of okay with the running back situation. After 2 weeks of watching this team, I don't think I'm okay with the running back situation anymore. But going back to Sunday, it comes down to those two things: the decision on 4th and 4 and the interception. I think that's why the Chiefs lost this football game.
No, yeah, you're 100% right. I didn't understand that 4th and 4. I thought it was just too much. I mean, you've done a great job of stopping them. Were you that worried they were going to run the ball for 2 quarters? And they do. I mean, they don't. To say the Eagles have a pass game, that's just not true. I don't think they do.
Yards
but that's kind of their style, though. They're not. And listen, Jalen Hurts' quarterbacking is fine. It's fine. It's not amazing. It's not elite. The best games he's ever had are in 2 Super Bowls he's played, which is perfect. That's what you want. But outside of that, he doesn't blow you away. I haven't seen anything from him that blows me away. It just, that 4th and 4 was so baffling. I don't understand it. And I think in Andy's head it's okay. We may be 10-10 till overtime. I understand that, but 4th and 4 at your own 30, was it something like that?
It was like 40-yard line. I mean, they were already in field goal range. The Eagles went 3 and out on the ensuing drive and still got 3 points.
That too. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it.
I like the faith in the defense, but yeah, at the same time, like, if you're gonna call a 4th and 4 and you're gonna go for it, have something better drawn up. I just don't understand what they ran, and the whole crowd was pretty upset in the stadium.
Well, it just, Andy going for it there is annoying. It's like, well, we beg you to go for it 90% of the time, and you don't. So now you just decided you want to go for it, and something that really didn't make any sense to go for it anyway. I think he just was trying. He outcoached himself there. Pure and simple. He outcoached himself there, and he's done that before. But it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, and the radio guys here in Kansas City have just said there's 0 run game. There's no reason to not play cover 2 all day on Kansas City because they won't run the ball. And they won't. And the reason why Patrick is leading the team in rushing is because the safeties are 9-10 yards back. They can't get there in time. Yeah. So it's just it's very tough to sit here and say, well, we'll get there. Are we? It just. And again, this happens to a lot of great teams. This happened to the Patriots. If you remember the last time they won the Super Bowl with Brady, I think
that would have been 2018.
Is when they came here. Was it 18?
Yeah.
Was it Monday night? Starting. No, maybe it was their next to last before Brady left New England. Okay. I think it was still Alex Smith. If you remember, I think it was a Monday night game.
Okay.
I believe, and we just outplayed them. If you remember that?
Yeah, I think that was actually a Thursday night game to kick off the season.
Thursday night. Okay, that's right.
Big game.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And everyone went, well, what's wrong with the Patriots? And I think they ended up losing 3 out of 5 to start or something like that. I mean, they weren't very good. But then they went on to win a bunch in a row and win the World Series, win the Super Bowl. So it just it happens, and Chiefs can figure it out absolutely, but they need a run game. Their defense looked a lot better, which I was nervous that was going to look terrible. It looked really good, but the problem is, Carrington Harrison brought this up. A local guy here said, we paid this D line all this money for them to really not even show up. They stopped the run, but that was it. They didn't get after Hurts at all. It just kind of seemed like, but Norman Watt, that was a hell of a sack. Look at that. I mean, just. So, I think there's a lot of potential in Norman Watt. I think you were right on the ball on that. He looks great. Very physical. I liked him a lot, so I think he has a lot of potential there.
The rookie shot, Gelati, and
I thought,
Noah Williams.
Yeah.
Noah Williams had the best coverage grade per PFF on Sunday.
Yeah. So it's there, right? The potential's there, but, the problem is, again, it just boils down to we got to score points.
Yeah.
And, and again, we touched on this to start, but what are the odds that the rookie corner was supposed to be there? I doubt it. I would assume it was probably a misread on his part, but it's one of those things in the league where sometimes the ball bounces your way. He turns around. Oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Oh shit, the ball's in my hands. So it's just, and shout out to Simmons for chasing him down. Yes. Because that's some hustle right there. That was impressive. I'm sure that was impressive in the stadium. But
18.5 miles per hour is what he was clocked at running. For a big boy.
That's quick. And people talk about.
I was going to say, in the stadium, when he hit him, I thought he killed him. That's how thunderous that it was.
It was wild. But people talked about he didn't play very well. I didn't see that. I thought he played fine.
I agree.
But I think the right side is very rough still.
Agreed.
I don't know. There's definitely it's there, but they have to find it. But bottom line, I think we're both on the same page here. If they lose Sunday night, I think we're looking at something we haven't seen in a long time. And we're looking at something that, maybe it is time for Andy to go. Maybe it is time for Andy to retire.
That's a hot take.
Well, it is, but we're starting to see the same patterns every year now. Yeah. And at some point...
They don't have the talent to overcome it anymore. These are the same things
Correct.
We've been complaining about for years. And they don't have, at least not on the field at the moment, they don't have the talent that is going to overcome these situations. And we saw that. We've seen that 2 weeks in a row now, that the Chiefs just don't have the talent at the moment on the field, because I do think they have it on the roster, but they don't have it on the field at the moment to overcome, these certain situations. And I think it'll get better. So I guess my question is to you, and I think this kind of goes also hand in hand with Sunday night. We'll really be able to answer this question next week, but is it time to panic?
It's time to be concerned. I don't know if it's time to panic. Listen, 3 games is 3 games. I think people read in too much to, teams that start 0-2 hardly ever make the playoffs. Yeah, but those are teams that are bad, and not every 0-2 start is a team that's not going to make the playoffs. Look at the Bengals, for God's sakes. They start 1-4 almost every year, and they make the playoffs 9 times out of 10. So I think it's just it has to do with who you have a quarterback and who you have in the room, and your schedule, and it just Chargers and Eagles is not an easy start for anybody. I think both of those are good teams. So it is what it is. They get a easier opponent than the Giants. But like we talked about, that defensive line for the Giants is terrifying. It's those are 5 monsters, or 4 monsters, however they line them. But it's going to be challenged. Offensively, defensively, I think they'll be just fine. They've seen Russell Wilson before. They know what he is. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. Um, just can they function offensively? That'll be the question of the game. Are they going to run the ball more? Do they feel like they should run the ball more? I think those are kind of, hypothetical. They do need to run the ball more.
Well,
and I think in it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Matt Nagy talking this week to the press was an interesting one to me. I think this was yesterday that he spoke, and we talked about identity. And so Soren Petro posed a question of like, why don't you guys get under center and run more? There was a drive where they came out under center, I think 4 plays in a row there in the second half, and that surprised me watching the film back. Like real time, it's kind of hard to. I mean, unless you're sitting there taking notes, of like what they're doing play by play to really necessarily go back and remember all the time. But watching the film of it, it kind of did surprise me that they came out under center a few times in a row. But I don't like the answer Nagy gave because, I mean, on one hand, he said, hey, whatever works for us, we're going to get comfortable with, right? But at the same time, like, what's your identity? We're more of a run out of shotgun kind of team. Like, it's not working. It's not working. So, like, cool, that's your identity. Change it. Change your identity. Figure out who you are. It's not your identity because it doesn't work. So stop trying to put that on yourself. Like, that's the part that I don't get. And, like, you kind of talking about Andy being stuck in his ways of, like, hey, this is who we are. Maybe it's not, actually. Like, maybe that's not who you guys are. Let's change it up.
Yeah, sometimes who you are isn't always the best. So you kind of got to look in the mirror, and I think that's part of it. Is just I don't think Andy looks in the mirror. I don't think he has his whole career, and that's worked out for him. I think Andy does it his way, but at the end of the day, sometimes your way will get you in trouble. So I just, when you have a coach that's like that, you're going to run into problems. If it's not today, it's 5 years from now. And I think we're at that point now to where he's had all this success and he's won his trophies and he's won his rings and he's put himself in probably the second best coach of all time. So now I think he's just trying to, jump and be the number one coach of all time, and it's tough, So I don't know, at the end of the day, if you push yourself in a way to make the Chiefs be this team that they're not, it's going to get you in more trouble. I think the Chiefs have to go back and, like you said, figure out who they are. Because Patrick can't. Somebody said the other day that this kind of looks like a high school team where Patrick does 90% of the work. I mean, 90% is, being generous. I think it's probably about 100% at this point. And that's not a bad thing. You always want the best player in the world to be doing the work, but he's not getting any help. And that's very obvious.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, another question I wanted to pose to you of something that I heard that was interesting of, we're watching Playoff Pat in week 1, week 2, right? How detrimental overall do you think that will be? Because my first thought when I heard that, I thought, you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't see Pat run like this usually until the postseason, like if he has to, or, certain games maybe, yeah. But we've seen it consistently through the first 2 weeks now. My concern is, and curious to hear your take on, Pat going to run out of steam at some point? I mean, we've seen this out of Josh Allen year over year. And look, Josh Allen does play great in the playoffs, right? But I think there's a point where between like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Herbert maybe even. I mean, Herbert had that terrible playoff game last year. Kind of see guys run out of steam. And it's like, you got to put on a cape all season long and be the hero for your team. Are you going to have that in January? And seeing Pat take all of these hits, lower on his shoulder, look, it's fun. That was awesome to see him absolutely run over one of the Eagles defenders in the middle of the field. And I didn't hear any chirping about that this week, so that was good. I was just waiting for it. But what's your concern on that? Of like, does Pat run out of energy at some point where it's just like you said? I mean, 99.9% of this offense right now is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at some point he's going to get tired of it, and he already looks tired of it. As we're 2 weeks in, you can just tell in his face that he's exhausted. I mean, and I think people find this as nitpicking a team that's won 3 Super Bowls and nitpicking a guy who's, the best of what he does. He can still be exhausted from trying to do everything. And you can just tell that he's very frustrated, and it's frustrating. I'm frustrated for him. It's frustrating watching it, and this year so far he hasn't been the wild, throwing balls side armed, and he's played more of a conscious quarterback this year. I haven't really seen him do his wild stuff. I mean, obviously that basically falling to the ground throw against the Chargers, but whatever. Nobody was there, so. In the deep balls he had, they weren't really challengeable. They were either going to get caught or they were going to get knocked away. In years past, he's thrown deep balls between 3 guys, and it's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But it just seems like this year he knows that if it's not one-on-one, I'm probably not getting it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other part of it too, is you got to make those catches. And Tyquan Thornton had, I think, 3 opportunities.
Yeah. Noah Gray had
that second one where Thornton went up over the corner. I said this to one of my friends the other day. If you go up over the corner in the NFL, that's your ball. I don't care who you are. If you're over the corner and you have your hands on it, that's yours. And he just drops it. And Pat couldn't have placed it much better. So it just. And Thornton almost missed the one he was wide open on.
Yeah.
So it's just like, come on, dude. I get it. And, maybe Pat threw it a little hard, but at the end of the day, you're wide open. So and he had to stop, and it's just like, oh my God. So, listen, Tyquan Thornton is fine, but it boils down to the Chiefs haven't spent money on the receivers, and they haven't spent money on the running backs, and this is what you get.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is right now, and hopefully they can figure that out. And, once they kind of get their steam going, which I still think they will, I'm not worried about that right now. But maybe they go out and get a guy that's a veteran who actually can still play. They've gone out and passed and gotten D-Hop, which was fine, but it really didn't do much, and it's just...
But their problem also
they gotta
is
find
they
a guy
don't use them. They'll go out and get somebody and not use them. Like, that's another super frustrating part of, like, the disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff, to where, look at Josh Uche, what he's done with the Eagles, and has been awesome with the Eagles the first couple of weeks. And the Chiefs, did we even see him on the field last year when they went out and traded for him? D-Hop is another one that was like, I feel like they used him more, but I think also developing a trust, because another side about the deep ball, because I do agree with you to a point. Although the one with Thornton that you were talking about, I do think the DB played really good defense on him. Although he did go up over him and go for it. But the timing is off. The stuff is weird, I think. And I don't know if that's more so of, like you said, Pat trying to put it where only his guy can go get it, or if it's, miscommunication, or, what exactly it is, or a timing thing with Pat being like, okay, I got to launch this thing and get out of here because my offensive line is falling apart. And, whatever, we could go more into the offensive line, but yeah, I think that right side is still having some problems. I'm more concerned about that. But, what is it that needs to be figured out? Because I can't quite put my finger on it. I kind of have watched the film to see, because live, one of the guys that sits around us was saying he felt like Tyquan Thornton slowed up on one of them that he missed. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but obviously there's a little bit of a disconnect with the deep ball. They finally got it there at the end of the game. How about the Nico Remigio catch? That was one moment that I was actually kind of happy with, because we've watched this for, 40 minutes now and nothing has worked. Try something else. It's like in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, they just kept going the same damn thing over and over and over. It was like, Tooney is not having a good day at left tackle. The interior, you've got DJ Humphries on the sideline doing nothing. Change it up at this point. What is there to lose? I mean, you're down, at that point, probably 34-0 by the time where I thought, like, do something else. It's not working. But it kind of goes back to, again, Andy stuck in his ways, and it is what it is. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a hot take saying maybe time for Andy to retire, but maybe you're onto something with that. I mean, it's getting there. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know, man. I don't know what the whole issue is, but it's something that I'm not 100% worried about. I guess concern would be the word, but I do agree with you. I mean, I think at some point they'll hit their stride and be a lot better, but. It's got to be Sunday. It's got to be this Sunday because you got the Ravens coming to town the following week. Then you play the Jags on the road. Then you host the Lions back at Arrowhead. And then you finally get to breathe with the Raiders. And then you got Jaden Daniels coming in the following week, October 27th. So, and then the Bills right after that. You don't really get a chance to breathe much until the second half of the schedule where it goes Colts, Cowboys, Texans, Chargers again. Titans, Broncos, Raiders to end the season. So, I mean, looking at the full spectrum of stuff, I mean, the Chiefs don't have an easy schedule, and the hardest part is right up front. So, I think we're kind of seeing that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's hard to have a tough schedule and be struggling at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hard, and we saw this when we got to off just a slow start a couple of years ago. You had a hard start to the year. There was no answer for receivers, and it looked bleak. And it looks kind of the same right now. Yeah. Did they figure it out in that season? Yes, they did. Will they figure it out again? I don't doubt it. But like we both said, Sunday's a huge point. They have to figure this out, and they have to do it. Unfortunately, on Sunday Night Football against the Giants. It's time to figure it out, or time to figure out who's gonna head out. Yeah. Like I said, and not that I want Andy to leave, not that I want Andy to retire, but you got to keep in mind he's not young. He's been doing this forever, and this is the same pattern that falls towards the end of his tenure with the team. Does whatever he wants, doesn't listen to anybody, and then he gets ran out of town. It happened in Philly. It'll happen here, but at least he's won championships here to where if he does leave, people will be like, oh, it's just another typical Andy Reid experience. It's been a phenomenal experience.
Absolutely.
But at some point, the Chiefs got to find something else, but panic, no. Concern, absolutely. I think it's like you said, concern is the word.
100%.
What did you think about? And I saw this the other day, and I don't know. How do you feel knowing that Joe Burrow was out again? And I texted you this at the game because you were watching the game, obviously. I mean, this guy, I don't know if he's made of tape and paper. How frustrating would that be? And this is, I think it's extreme turf toe or something like that. Grade 3, from what I understand, or a severe case of it. Another injury. I think this is his 4th injury in 5 years that's kept him out. Something like that.
Something like that, because you go back 2 years ago, he missed the end of the season. Obviously, his rookie year, he missed basically the whole season. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. I mean, if you're a Bengals fan, I mean, it's extremely frustrating because it does kind of go back on the front office and where to spend money. And, I mean, fandoms, like to talk about other fandoms, right, and whatnot. And, everybody kind of clowned the Bengals saying, you go out and spend all this money on 2 receivers and a quarterback while your offensive line is in despair. The defense is terrible. You chase a great defensive coordinator out of town to, be the scapegoat for the defense when that wasn't the issue. It's the talent level that's the issue. Um, I think the Bengals as a franchise is terrible. I mean, that is a poverty franchise at the end of the day, with some really, really good players. They have a lot of talent between those three guys. Other than that, I mean, you got Trey Hendrickson on the defensive side. That's about it. The rookie that they finally got signed, he's looked pretty good. They do have a rookie linebacker that's looked pretty good too, but it's not going to be enough to win. I don't think when January rolls around, personally. But I would say, yeah. I mean, Joe Burrow is very much a very injury-prone guy, and that's nothing against Burrow. It just is what it is. Like, that's what we've seen, right? He is injury-prone. And I don't know. As a Bengals fan, it'd be super frustrating. I think. I know that fan base is upset, but I don't know, dude. Looking forward for the Bengals, like that's hard to think that they are going to. I think it's a coaching problem too. I don't think Zach Taylor, terrible play caller, especially when the game is on the line. They get a win last week, but then how far does that carry you? They are 2-0 at the moment. But again, yeah, how far does that carry you? Jake Browning, I don't know. We'll see. Although he has comparable numbers to Burrow. That's another thing that I've kind of talked about where it's, we want to boast up Burrow that he's the best quarterback in the league, or, he's up there with everybody else. And, like, to me, he's the one that looks the most funny in the light when you try to compare him to Mahomes, Allen, Lamar. He has great stats, right? Hasn't won anything with it. Gets hurt a lot, and he also has the most help out of anybody. And look, I understand offensive line is terrible. The defense is terrible. So saying that to a lot of people is like, what do you mean Burrow has no help? Well, he has the two best receivers. He has the best receiving core in the game. We have watched Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes make, what did Brock Lesnar say? Chicken salad out of chicken shit at receiver. We have seen that from all three of those guys. We've never seen that from Burrow because he's had so much talent, which I don't know how to put that because I don't want to necessarily disparage Burrow for having talent, but, and, I'm sure many people would be like, oh, that's rich coming from some Chiefs fans but I get it. Kelsey has been here, but Kelsey has been in decline for 3 years now. I mean, ever since he got hurt before the Lions game, I think that's kind of been the decline of Kelsey. And
listen,
since Tyreek Hill left, the receiving core has been meh.
Yeah, and listen, I'm so tired of that. We won one Super Bowl with Tyreek Hill. We won one Super Bowl with Tyreek Hill. We won two
defense
without him. We won 2 Super Bowls with Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, and Juju Smith-Schuster, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
And we've been to 3 in a row. Can you stop? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And an old Travis Kelce, oh yeah, we're just boiling to the brim with offensive weapons. So just shut up.
That's the only time they'll admit Kelsey's a Hall of Fame tight end. He's one of the best tight ends to ever.
The only time they'll ever admit one of the best tight ends to ever play the game is actually one of the best tight ends to ever play the game. It's just so annoying. Listen, I know people think they're educated on that kind of stuff, but it's just. And I'm not dogging anybody, but it's just, if you don't know, you don't know, and it's the same thing. And I think you're right. Zach Taylor is garbage. I mean, just how do you start every single year so awful and then magically pull together? And you magically pull together because you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. You had Joe Mixon, which I think was a terrible mistake to let him go. You have Chase Brown. Chase Brown's good, but it's not the same. I feel like Mixon was a better option for them. And they had a tight end too. I can't remember. Can't remember who their tight end is right now. Okay, see, and that's not the same either. Because they had 3 and Tyler Boyd. So you had 3 phenomenal receivers, a great tight end, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. I mean, how that team doesn't win 2 championships, I don't know. So it's just it. You know who they remind me of? They remind me of the 03 Chiefs. just phenomenal offensively. Just weapons up and down the field, but they lose. But they didn't get Super Bowl like the Bengals did. But that was against Peyton Manning and the Colts. So, whatever. But
they're like the
it's
03 Chiefs if you gave them receivers instead of a great offensive line.
Yes. Yeah, that's very fair. So, I don't know. It's frustrating to be for Bengals fans, I'm sure. Because I think they have a lot of high hopes in Burrow, but at the end of the day, see, she agrees too. It's just frustrating, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, if you look at what the Bengals have done, they don't have any money. I think their owner is literally the poorest owner in the league. It's bizarre to me. They consider themselves an elite franchise.
Who's in the worst spot right now with the Bengals being 2-0 and the Chiefs 0-2? Who's in a worse spot, in your opinion?
I mean, I think at the long run, I think we are. But I think for the short term right now, the Bengals are in a bad spot. Yeah. But the Bengals have talent to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a couple years ago when Matt Moore came in. If you can win a couple games with Jake Browning, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But keep in mind, with Joe Burrow, the Bengals scored 17 points against the Browns and almost lost. Should have lost. Let me correct that. Should have lost. Half. Yeah, so it's not like the Bengals were tearing it up with Joe Burrow.
Right.
They looked pretty bad. So it's, I don't know. The league is funny. The league always does it. So maybe there's hope for everybody. Maybe I'm just distracting myself from, the horrendous downfall, or not the horrendous downfall, but, the horrendous, the downfall of us, and, just the downtrodden play of everyone in Kansas City right now. It's just so great,
So let's go positives. Let's go positives. Let's get into this game this weekend, and let's talk a little bit about the positives of Jalen Royals at practice, Xavier Worthy back at practice. Mm-hmm. I think Worthy's probable right now. Let me pull that up real quick, the injury report. But I do think that that's very positive for the Chiefs. Obviously, like we said, they don't have the talent to get out of it right now. But like I was saying, I think they have the talent to on the roster. They just don't have the talent on the field. So with that being said, how do you feel going into this week? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but altogether, how are you feeling about the Chiefs heading into Sunday night?
I feel better that Worthy's back. That was kind of obvious that was a huge miss. Hollywood Brown could only do so much, and he came off the field hurt. And I was like, oh my God.
So, okay,
here we go.
To go back to that injury report, so we had Mike Dana has not practiced, have not got the status for Friday just yet at the time of recording. Christian Fulton didn't practice all week. Jalen Royals light practice Wednesday, full practice Thursday. Xavier Worthy light practice both Wednesday, Thursday. I don't see an actual status for anybody yet, but the official, final injury reports have not come out for this week, so just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, hopefully Worthy is 100% by Sunday. It appears that he will be. So, I mean, that's all good news. There was concern, like I said, when Hollywood Brown went out, that he could be injured, and everyone was worried about that. Turns out he came back on the field, and everything seemed fine. So, it just – and then Simmons went down, and then, oh, my God, now Simmons is hurt. It's just like, when things snowplow, they snowplow. So, it seemed like we were going to look at some really negative things heading into Sunday night. But it just kind of seems like those things have kind of quilled themselves. So the positive is that I'm pretty sure that this can be a really good bounce back game for them. I don't know if you've heard, but ESPN and a lot of different broadcasters said the game will be rigged for us, so that's great news. We'll win either way. because they can't let the Chiefs go 0-3. So hey, we already won. So there's really no point in even going to New York. Um, but I feel like this will be a bounce back for them. Is it a back on track? I don't know, because they got to play Lamar the next week. So it. I think two great defensive games in a row will really give us some confidence heading into the game against Lamar. But the offense has got to show up. It's got to play a full game, and then they just got to be ready to go. At the end of the line, they just got to be ready to go, and then they haven't been. But I think we'll see that Sunday night.
Yeah, dude, I agree with you. I think that they know they got to get it together. I mean, it's either 0 and you're either going 0-3 or 1-2 heading in to face Lamar Jackson at home and the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to be ready for that game. I mean, they didn't get a chance to see the Chiefs again in the playoffs last year. The last time they played, Week 1 last year, the toe game that was, I don't know. I don't understand the dispute behind that one, but it is what it is. It's a game of inches. But I think that Baltimore is going to be ready to go. I mean, it's going to be back to almost. I wish I could remember what year that was. 2021, I believe, where the Chiefs went into Baltimore, lost to the Ravens, and Lamar had one of his best games ever. I think that it's going to be kind of on that level to where the Ravens have something to prove. And then the loss to Buffalo in Week 1 as well, that they'll have to coast on, and be motivated by. So I think that this game, they know how important it is. And like you said, it's kind of funny talking about how, after how the last 5 or 6 years have gone for the Kansas City Chiefs, or 7 years since Mahomes has been here, the biggest game of the year right now is Week 3 at New York against the Giants. And, how big this game is for the Chiefs. So I think you're right. I think that they're going to come out as motivated as possible. Hopefully, they get Jalen Royals on the field. Hopefully they get Xavier Worthy on the field. But I don't know. We'll see. What about prediction? What do you got Sunday night? Final score?
Well, I was dead wrong last week. So, I don't, I don't want to make it seem like I have no idea what I'm talking about, but sometimes I feel like I don't. I can't remember what I ended up saying. I think I said, 24, 21 or something like that,
so.
which is maybe 27, 24. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think 27-24. I had 34-31. I was hopeful for the offense.
I feel like they get to 27 this week. I feel like outside of the Giants' defensive line, there's not a lot there. Offensively, the Giants are pretty meek. Russell Wilson had a great game against the Cowboys, but Cowboys are not very good. I think that, like I said, this can be a really great bounce back game for them. Just kind of clear the air of some of that negativity from the locker room. Or this could be another Colt situation to where they easily should beat this team and then they just absolutely wet the bed and lose. I don't foresee that happening. I don't foresee them scoring a whole bunch of points. I would probably say, I said 27, but I'll cut it back. I'll say 24-14. I think the defense is starting to come back around. So I'll give the Chiefs a 24-14 win in this one. I think it's just, I don't think we see a lot from the Giants. I think we see just enough from the Chiefs. I think Pat has another good game. I think the Chiefs have the lead for majority of this game and keep it the whole time.
Yeah, see, and that's one thing that I kind of heard. This is why I say I don't think that a lot of Kansas City media is taking the Giants as seriously as, they are. The Cowboys' defense is not good, right? I think the Kansas City Chiefs' defense is much better. But on the flip side, what I heard on the radio was the Chiefs go out to a 2-touchdown lead, never look back, kind of coast the rest of the game off of 14-0 start. I don't know if I see that happening. I mean, I think, it was funny. I was talking to Ray yesterday, and he was just cracking up for what I was saying because I was like, look, this is who the Chiefs are at this point. They're going to come out in this game. They're going to go 3-and-out on the first drive. Defense is going to have to get a couple of stops. They're going to then by like against the will of God, go on a field goal drive and, end up, whatever. So I'm going to go super pulled back this week. And I'm going to say 17-13 is the final score. I think it's still a one score game. I don't think the offense does a whole lot. Maybe Patrick Mahomes isn't the leading rusher this week. Like, let's cross our fingers. I'm going to be hopeful that he's not. Maybe we see a little bit more Brashard Smith. Even if Worthy is back, even if Royals is in the lineup, I don't see them being like huge factors in this game. Just for the simple fact of, one, you got Worthy, you're trying to just get back into it. Andy doesn't love putting rookie receivers in a lot of spots by this time of the year. Kind of likes to, and maybe we do see otherwise, because what we've seen the last 2 years between Rice and Worthy is that Andy likes to get them started quick. Week 1, and then they kind of scale back for the rest of the season, and then you start to see him more towards the end of the season. So maybe he tries to get the same thing out of Royals in this game if he's really fully ready to go. But I'd still just, as the trust there between Royals and Mahomes, I don't know. I mean, we did see a lot out of them in training camp and the preseason, so maybe they've built up a little bit, but I think Tyquan Thornton is really the guy that Mahomes does have trust in after the first 2 weeks. Does he have the same amount of trust in him? I don't know. But based on what everybody's talking about, coaching staff-wise, is, having the deep shot there. They've went for it. We've seen it a lot more than the last couple of years. And then I did like what Spags had to say, too, yesterday, where, we need the turnovers. And I love the reaction he got to the question, because, I mean, when Spags was asked about turnovers, he, kind of rolled his eyes and, was like, yeah, we don't cause turnovers. No, the Chiefs defense is very good. Bend but don't break defense, right? This is what we've seen the last 3-4 years now, but also not a team that gets a lot of turnovers. So I do like the emphasis on trying to get the turnovers. Let's see more out of the rookies. If Dana's not there, we're going to see more Gelati, Omar Norman Lott as well. Hopefully, if Fulton's out, not hopefully Fulton's out, but hopefully we see more out of Noel Williams as well if Fulton's going to be out. I think that he is absolutely, the Chiefs can draft DBs. They are very good at drafting DBs, they've shown over the last few years. So I think that it's a low-scoring game. I think that it's still going to be tough. They're going to have to fight for every yard. And, honestly, barring any big mistakes, the Chiefs should really be 1-1 right now, at least. Winning that Eagles game. So, barring any big mistakes on Sunday night, I think they come out with a win. And it's still difficult, but not, they're not playing the Eagles. They're not playing the Chargers. They're playing the Giants. So, I think that every yard is still going to have to be fought for. But I do think that it's a little bit more of a concise victory, optic-wise.
Yeah, I agree with you. It just kind of seems like these are the games where it's kind of like the Saints game last year, and it just seems like we'll probably win, not sure by how much or if the offense decides to play well or not, but I think the defense will carry them, and they did. I think the Chiefs won pretty easily in that game. One of the few times they did win pretty easily last year. So I think it'll be one of those. Obviously Russell Wilson knows the Chiefs well enough. Played them in Denver a couple times. So, like I said, that'll help the Chiefs defense too. Yeah, Pittsburgh last year. So it'll help the Chiefs defense a lot, knowing who Russell Wilson is. I think this is probably the least amount of talent he's had since being a quarterback. So, I think it'll help. So, I mean, I think there's confidence heading into Sunday night, but there's a lot of, a slight skepticism on, will they play well or will they fall on their ass? So hopefully not, but I'm with you. I think 1-2, and then cross our fingers for the Ravens at this point. Listen, I think people are, again, it's the media's idea of trying to find the prettiest girl at the moment. It's not, who's been there the longest and who's won the most, or who's been there to hold your hand the longest. Who's the prettiest right now?
Yeah.
And whoever's the prettiest is, the best team in the world. And it's like, well, no, they're not, but okay. So at the end of the day, look, the Ravens are going to get a lot of hype into that game. Obviously, we'll talk about that more when it gets closer. But, don't get distracted by the fact that the Ravens have never beaten the Chiefs when it matters. The Bills have never beaten the Chiefs when it matters. So at the end of the day, will the Ravens win that game? Probably. But will it matter?
I'm with you. I'm with you right there. Okay,
It will
let's transition a little bit because we got another big game on Saturday to talk about with the Missouri
That's true.
Tigers. The Missouri Tigers, they play the South Carolina Gamecocks. That is 6 p.m. tomorrow night in Columbia, Missouri for the Mayor's Cup. How you feeling about that?
Talk about a shocker. Well, I'm feeling better now after Vanderbilt ran all over them.
Yeah.
It just seems like that was a shocker. South Carolina got rolled by Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt has done that the past couple of years, so it shows they've gotten better. But it was a shock, and a lot of people are kind of questioning if South Carolina is legitimate anymore, because I think there was a lot of really big question marks that they showed in that game. Apparently, their offense is not consistent, and that really showed in the Vanderbilt game. Um, there were a couple other questions that I was watching but kind of forgot. But the main concern heading out of that game for people who were South Carolina fans or media in general was that offense is not consistent. And it's just Sellers is the main star, and then it's just a bunch of other cast, and their defense has problems. So it's looking good, in terms of what we thought we were going to run into.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of hope, I think hopes are high for Saturday night. I think Mizzou has a real chance to put their names on the map here this year. But always looked phenomenal. Had a little bit of not rough, but it wasn't his best game against Louisiana. But at the end of the day, if you looked at their overall production, it was I look at Hardy at 250 yards. That's just ridiculous. So I think Missouri has a phenomenal run game again, which we've all seen what happens when Mizzou has a great run game. So, I think hopes are high. I really think this is a big stepstone for Mizzou, but I think they can handle this one pretty well.
Yeah, and I totally understand the loss to Vanderbilt, but it is kind of crazy to see that they straight up dropped out of the rankings from number 11 after losing to Vanderbilt. Missouri now at number 23. Still think that's a little low for Mizzou at the moment, but we're gonna see Saturday. I think Lenore Sellers is trending to play on Saturday. He left due to an injury. He was back at practice on Thursday. I do think that this is the game, like right now at least, to really show you've got a tough game with South Carolina. It's a rivalry game, so they're gonna come out and play. Yeah, they're gonna come out and play hard against each other. Maybe I don't know, man. This is one rivalry that I actually looked up a few weeks ago because I was like, what is the rivalry there? Oh, they both play in Columbia. Like that's how they built that rivalry. Of like, oh, you play in Columbia, South Carolina, we play in Columbia, Missouri. Let's make a rivalry here. As the Tigers move to the SEC, which I get it. You need your rivals, I guess, but I mean, we saw a couple of weeks ago. There's nothing that's gonna ever change the fact that the Mizzou-Kansas rivalry is the biggest out of any Missouri rivalry, but I do think that this is still going to be a litmus test for them. I mean, it's the first SEC game of the year, but I do think that I think we should see the Tigers win by maybe 2 scores. And 2 scores, I kind of put at 10 points. You know what I mean? Like maybe not necessarily by 14 by 2 touchdowns, but I do think that Mizzou needs to win this by like 10 points. I mean, if it's closer than that, cool, but I think they need to try to get on that mindset of we are that much better than you. Lost to Vanderbilt last week. Then you got UMass coming up, and then Bama is the big game, I think, to really get a stronghold on who this team is. But we get our first kind of peek of who this team truly is. They did well with the adversity in the Kansas game. there's going to be some adversity at some point tomorrow night for the Tigers, I think. And how do they handle it? That's going to be, the real litmus test. But yeah, keep that ball on the ground. Keep pounding the rock is how I feel about it. Give Bo the ability to work behind play action and just keep rolling.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it just kind of seems like, Mizzou is, and a lot of people talk about Bo. A lot of people feel like that was a great steal from Penn State. So his expectations are high. After the first couple games, I think Missouri's expectations are higher now than they were. So I think there's a lot of big expectations for the Tigers, and if they come out here tomorrow night and they win that game by 2 scores, like you said, and maybe it's 10 points, maybe it's 13, who knows? I think they'll be, I think Missouri is going to be in a great spot. I don't think Alabama's as good as people think they are. They looked pretty dreadful against Florida State, who was absolutely horrendous last year. And then they beat a random team. I'm not even sure who it was. But, this is Mizzou's chance. If you beat South Carolina, hopefully you beat UMass, and you play Alabama and you beat Alabama, then you're kind of looking like a team you were when you first got here.
Yeah.
You were kind of looking like an SEC favorite again. So, I don't want to say next 3 games are tests, but 2 of the next 3 games are huge tests.
Yeah.
For Mizzou coming up. And like I said, I think they have a really good chance here of starting off the year 5-0 or 6-0. Should be 5, right? 1, 2,
if they win
5.
this weekend, it'll be 4-0, and so then UMass 5-0. Yeah.
4. Okay, I can remember if you're on 3 or 4. Okay, so anyway, 6-0. I really think they have a big chance here. 6-0.
And you look at I get they played Louisiana last weekend, but between Hardy, Davis, and Roberts, 400 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Ahmad Hardy ran for 11.4 yards per carry. I think that Bo Prabula was a steal from Penn State, but Ahmed Hardy from ULM may be the biggest steal of all. And I think we kind of knew that coming in. But even just like the way we're talking about Mizzou now versus the way we talked about Mizzou coming into the season, yeah, the expectations have completely changed. I think that it does kind of feel like at this point, and we're only 3 games in, we haven't seen an SEC game yet, but it does kind of feel like the Missouri Tigers right now are a playoff team or bust going into their 4th game of the season against South Carolina. That's going to definitely change on Saturday for better or for worse, depending on how they play South Carolina. But I will say for the Tigers, I think this weekend is a win. I'll say a 10-point win. Let's go. I'm going to go 31-21. They get a 10-point win. What's your prediction for Saturday night?
That's pretty close. I think it'll probably be, I don't know. Missouri's offense has been pretty explosive. I just feel like you said, Hardy was a steal. I think Mizzou got a bunch of steals in the transfer portal. Kevin Coleman Jr., he's their top receiver right now.
Coming from Mississippi State.
And then, they have a bunch of different defensive guys that they got. So, Mizzou nailed the transfer portal.
They are looking against lesser competition, but they're looking like 2008 Oklahoma right now, 61-42-52.
Yeah, and and again, I think people kind of get lost on, they're scoring those against worse teams. Well, if they were bad, they wouldn't score that. So it's just, all these good teams score against bad opponents. It's kind of obvious. But if if you're not scoring 40 points a game against teams you should be, you're probably not very good. So I think that shows that Mizzou does have that talent. I think they win a little more convincingly. I'd probably say, I think because of how explosive they've been, now watch them score like 4 points. But, I would probably say, let's go 38-24. I think with Zellers having some injury questions heading into the game, that'll probably hinder him a little bit. And I think Mizzou's offense is too much right now. I think they're too good offensively. So I expect this one to not be easy, but I think towards the second half, we'll see Mizzou run away with it.
Yeah, I like that thought of running away with it in the second half, and I could see that. But going back to kind of what you said about, me mentioning the scores they've put up, and we know they're not playing the best competition in the beginning of the season, but me and you talked about this. I don't think we actually talked about this on the podcast, but we talked about it just texting that Mizzou kind of notoriously plays down to their competition and some of these not as good teams, and I think that we've seen that over the last few years where they play down to some of these teams. We haven't seen that this year. We haven't seen that at all this year. I mean, even in the Kansas game where, we talked about it a lot going into it and after that, dissecting that game, that once the second quarter happened, I really never felt like that game was too much in question. Yeah, Kansas had their moments. They went up a time or two, I think, after that. But I think after that quarter, I kind of just thought Missouri is obviously better than Kansas. They were obviously better than Central Arkansas. They're obviously better than Louisiana, and they showed it. They win by 11 against Kansas, 61-6 against Central Arkansas, and now 52-10 over Louisiana. I don't think you see this from the Brady Cook led teams or some of those teams in the late 2010s that Kansas probably gets that win against one of those teams where maybe they beat Louisiana, I don't know, 38-28 or 38-24, like you said, like your prediction against South Carolina. Maybe Central Arkansas, they don't score 61 points, they score 40 points against them. Where I think this is kind of like this, and this is how you have to gauge these teams of. Right, you're supposed to beat this team, but how do you beat this team? I mean, they absolutely shut down Central Arkansas. I mean, they had their moments early in the game where they were kind of moving the ball, and we talked about that, being a little bit worried about the defense. But, the Kansas game, being able to battle through the adversity of a 21-6 score at one point, and then absolutely rolled over Louisiana. They carried that momentum from the Kansas game into the Louisiana game. We're seeing this team grow as they continue to play week by week. So all the positive signs are there against lesser competition. Now we see it against an SEC team tomorrow night. So, yeah, no, I like your prediction. I would love to see a 38-24 and them just run away with it. I think it may be a little bit closer, but I like that prediction either way. So, last but not least, or that I have at least, I don't know if you want to talk about anything else. I don't know how much you want to talk about this. But how about those Royals?
Well, it's been nice talking to you, Papa Shro. Well, listen, I mean, it is what it is. They've had so many injuries, and at the worst time possible. I mean, Kyle Isbell just got hurt the other night. And it's just another guy that got hurt, and Ryan Bargert, he got hurt. He's supposed to start last night. Stephen Kolek came in, or yesterday, I should say. Stephen Kolek came in and pitched 7 one-run innings. He was phenomenal. I like Stephen Kolek a lot. I like Bargert a lot. They just had just terrible timing for injuries. I mean, obviously, their terrible month of play in June doesn't help. But those injuries came when they were getting hot. It's just when you lose basically 5 pitchers, and that was your strength, you're going to lose. And that's just what happened. But, there's a lot of positives. Carter Jansen looks phenomenal. He's been really hitting the ball well. He hit 2 home runs the other night for his, first 2 career home runs in the same game. Jack looks better. He's still having a hard time. He's not striking out hardly as much. He's making contact at least. He's making better decisions with his at-bats. So you're seeing the positives from him spending more time in AAA. It hasn't translated yet. I think we'll see the translation next year. But you're seeing more positives out of that. Bobby still looks like Bobby. Michael struggled a little bit. But like I said, all these guys are coming back. It's not like, oh, man, I hope Bobby comes back. Bobby will be here for a long time. Yeah. I think Michael will stay for a while. Then he's going to be here for a while. I think the only question is, is Carter your starter next? Well, didn't even make that rhyme, but is Carter the starter next year? Just how they, hanging up, we'll see. Um, I think you would be hard pressed for him to play another year, or at least start. We'll put it that way. I don't think he starts next year if he comes back, just for his age. But he's turned, he turned a questionable age year into a pretty good year. 30 home runs.
Yeah.
He's almost at 100 RBIs. And he got his 300th home run and his 1,000th RBI this year. So, he's turned a year that looked questionable into another decent year. So, at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind that this team was not very good 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In fact, they were terrible. So there's a lot of improvement and there's a lot of hope. Like I said, well, last week or whatever, jokingly, this is an Esteban Herman and, Matt Harvey and, Ken Stair, it's not Matt Stairs. It's not those guys. It's guys who can play. It's guys who are young. It's, guys who have a future. So, I mean, it's disappointing, but at the end of the day, it's very hopeful that, I think this team can really turn into something next year and the following years. I think, the Royals look really bright.
No, I completely agree. Look, this year is a setback. 9 games left, 7 games out of the wild card. This team's not going to make the playoffs, right? Or, I mean, we've seen crazier in baseball. So, I mean, maybe, but more than likely this team's not making the playoffs. 3-7 in their last 10. But very hopeful. I don't think that you should take it, any Royals fans out there, I don't think should take this as too much of a negative, right? It's a minor setback. It's frustrating in a sense of, like, obviously you want to see your team in the playoffs every year. But going back to 2 years ago, I mean, this is a 100-loss team 2 years ago, right? Yeah, so I mean, look at how far the Royals have come. They're at 76 and 77 with 9 games left. I mean, they can still finish above 500, and they made the playoffs last year. They had a good fight with the Yankees in that divisional series a year ago. I think that the Royals are set up for the future. Jack is only going to get better. The little bits and pieces that they've had of the good stories of, guys coming up and showing a little bit of what they have. Like you said, Bobby's not going anywhere. You still have Vinny Pasquantino. You have the nucleus of the team is there, right? And it does kind of feel like maybe this team is at a point of like where they were in 2013, heading into the 14, 15 years where, those teams put it together and, hey, this is, I'm trying to quantify like what Kansas City is, right? Because I think that is a part of just the culture of Royals baseball where 2014, 2015, nobody expected that team to be as good as they were. I mean, maybe in 15 a little bit more than 14, but I don't think that this is a team that can kind of come out of nowhere. And, the vibe of the locker room, the boys are playing ball, like that kind of stuff is what makes champions, I think, in baseball, of any sport really, of just, the vibe of the locker room. I mean, we were talking about that about the Chiefs earlier, is where the Chiefs have went from this happy-go-lucky team to a complacent team out there on the field. And I think that this Royals team, I don't think that you can hang your head too much on this season because it is kind of outside things. All the injuries, I mean, you can't account for that. You can't account for, having the type of injuries that the Royals have had over the course of the season. And you go back to the bad play in June of, it is what it is. You're gonna fall into slumps through the season. And the Royals really battled. I mean, to even be where they were a couple of weeks ago, where they were like, they were one game out at one point. I mean, the fight is there in this team. So I think that everything surrounding this is very hopeful because, how far can you go when you have just injury after injury after injury and it's just depleting? So I don't know. I think the future is very, very bright for the Kansas City Royals. And, hey, man, you could be a Cardinals fan. It's what I'll say. The future's not bright on the other side of the state right now.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing Royal fans have to look forward to. Is that on top of that the Cardinals have pretty much sold their souls and look horrendous. But you're right. It's just I think someone said if the Royals played 500 baseball in June, they would be, I think, 2 games out from the Tigers right now. So, you know, it, it, and like you said, you're absolutely right. To battle back the way they did and be within a game of the Mariners. Um, and listen, they just had the 3-game series with the Mariners. Outside of um, Dominic Canzone going 5 for 5 with 3 home runs, which was bananas, and Cal Raleigh having 2 home runs, the Mariners weren't a billion times better than the Royals. I watched it, and they weren't. They were about the same. They just have more power. The Mariners, and I'm saying the Mariners are a bad team. They have a great roster.
Yeah.
They have a phenomenal offense. But I wasn't walking away from the series going, "Oh boy, we'd get stomped in the playoffs." I walked away going, "Well, we could probably beat them in the playoff series if we had to." So I again, they're there. But I think you nailed it on the head. It's kind of a reverse of the 2013 season to where, they made the playoffs the next 2 years. I think last year was kind of if the Royals in 2013 made the playoffs, right? I just feel like that was kind of a little bit premature. I felt like they were still 2 years away at that point, but they got there. So yeah, it's disappointing, but it's easier to be disappointed knowing that they have all this talent coming back.
Yeah, and I think between this season and last season, the fact they made the playoffs, made it a series with the Yankees, they fought back the way that they did to get so close. It shows the grit in this team. This team is a gritty team, and they're going to scrap for every inch. And I think that is maybe the most positive part, because hey, we all get to dust ourselves off and start a new 2026. So I think get the best production you can out of these last 9 games. Keep everybody healthy for the last 9 games. Let's reset. Get back into Arizona in February, and get another crack at it. Because I think next year that this team, again, and I think we talked about it last week a little bit, how sustainable is Detroit? I mean, Detroit's been really good these last 2 years, but in baseball, we see that happen all the time where a team just falls off. Like, how sustainable is Javi Baez in center field? Is he going to be playing at this level for multiple years? Probably not. Pitching is a thing that's just weird, a lot of times. Is Skubal going to continue to be the best pitcher in the league? And maybe he is, but at the same time, I think the playing field may be leveled a little bit next year. And like you said, knowing the fact that, hey, if we would have just played 500 ball in June, we were right there with the Tigers. Like, that is, I think that's good news of just, hey, we just got to keep focus all year and not let ourselves really get behind the 8 ball too much of, because, I mean, the offense was so bad in June that, we just got to – everybody can't not hit at the same time. Like, that, I think that should be the focus on next year. Like, if we're going to go in a slump, let's all do it at different times so that way our offense isn't just nuked for, an entire month. But I think positive vibes all the way around, even not making the playoffs. I don't think that it's – like you said, it's disappointing, but it's easier to be disappointed here. But other than that, anything else you got on your mind here this week, EDJ?
No, I think we're in for a lot of fun action again this weekend. I think is WrestlePalooza. I think WrestlePalooza's Saturday.
Yeah.
So a lot of, again, I think for like the 4th weekend in a row, TV, like I told you the other night, it just seems to be hitting on all cylinders. So there's going to be a lot of fun TV throughout the weekend. So enjoy everybody's weekend, and hopefully we walk away feeling a little bit better about ourselves. And, if not, who's going to be the new head coach of the Chiefs? We'll put it But hopefully that's not the case. So we'll see. We'll see after this weekend, and hopefully have a lot of positive things to talk about on Monday.
Absolutely. As always, I appreciated EDJ joining the pod, and another wonderful hour plus of us to listen to this week. You have a good weekend there, sir. Everybody have a good weekend. Your boy Papa Shro is out.